I want to bring in Mark Shanahan, an Associate Professor of Politics at the University of Surrey. Mark, good to have you during what really has been history in the making for the last 3 days. What do you make of what we're seeing right now? These two brothers coming together in solidarity, in unity to say goodbye to their beloved grandmother and also to mourn and commiserate with the British public.
Indeed, this is the ending of an era and the starting of a new era. So the ending of the Elizabethan era. And I guess it's the time for the family to heal as much as anything. We've all heard about the well-publicized rifts and all of the almost celebritization of the royal family over the previous few years. But now, I mean, it had to be expected that the Queen was going to die. She'd been in noticeable decline since the death of her husband, Prince Philip. And we'd heard all the way through the year about the mobility issues that she faced, which were cover for many, many things, I'm sure. But it is really good to see the young royals interacting directly with the public who are still, to some extent, in a sense of shock, but are very proud of their Queen, very sad. I mean, there is a real mood of sadness across the country at the moment, but also a sense of drawing together. It is one thing that the British do well, is responding to this kind of situation. We saw it with Diana back in the 1990s. And it does bring the nation together, not in the happiest of times, but we kind of do sad times well.
Yes, and it's incredible to think that it was just on Tuesday that Britain also got a new Prime Minister. Liz Truss was sworn in. She was sworn in, of course, by the Queen, her last official duty at Balmoral. And then a few days later, this monumental news that I think people obviously knew would eventually happen. The Queen was 96 years old, but it almost seemed, it was quite a shock when it actually did happen. Her son, of course, King Charles III, now taking over. But his son, Prince William, as we can see from these pictures now, he takes on the title of Prince of Wales. What exactly changes in his role, and what type of responsibility does he now have?
He will take on many of the responsibilities that his father had as Prince of Wales. Obviously, as King Charles III, Charles now assumes the duties of the monarch, from being head of state to head of the church to all of the situations that he will find himself in representing the United Kingdom around the world. So now William, pretty seamlessly and probably quicker than many of us expected, steps directly into his father's shoes. He becomes Prince of Wales. It's a nominal title in terms of being head of the Principality of Wales. So Scotland previously had kings. Wales was never a separate country in its own right. It was a principality of the English kings. And William now becomes their prince. Catherine, his wife, Kate, will really step up as well. But in Charles's address to the nation, he said that he really wanted William and Catherine to engage with those who may be disengaged or less engaged with the country, to bring those people in from the margins of society as far as any royal member of the royal family can. So it's quite a task to step up. It involves heading a lot of charities, heading a lot of projects. And it's not just being the guest who turns up at the nice dinners. It is a real job that involves an awful lot of meeting people, listening to their cases, listening to their causes, and acting in their best interests and on the best behalf of all of those organisations that the Prince of Wales will head.
Of course, that is a lot more responsibility. He is, of course, also next in line to the throne. And Mark, I'd like to get your take on what you thought of the new king's speech yesterday on Friday, and in that address, he spoke about both his sons and both their wives, as well as his own wife, Camilla, now Queen Camilla, and King Charles. One has to remember that he's now king. Spoke about ruling with love. It's quite a change that we see from what many would think is a bit of the monarchy, a bit, a very formal institution. And so when you start speaking about emotion and speaking about things like love and wanting to rule with love, what does that tell us about the new king and how he wants his reign to be remembered?
Well, the Queen was very much a 20th century monarch, and she'd been ruling for 70 years. So 1952, she came to the throne as a very young woman, but a young woman who'd been born in 1926, so had come up in a very, very different era and a very, very different time. Charles was always in a slightly awkward position of almost falling between eras. He's not a young man himself. He's 73. And I think he sees now the royal family exercising its constitutional rule over the country as much more a team game. The two sons will be very, very much involved. It's great to see Harry there in Windsor today and being involved. He took the decision to move to the United States with his wife and to start a life over there. I wonder if he will be drawn back in much more closely to royal affairs in the future because of this idea of sharing responsibility. I'm sure the Queen always saw her duty as ruling with love as well, but just wasn't of the era or of the age where people expressed themselves in quite the same way. William is 40 himself. He will be king, I guess, at some point in the next 20 years, 25 years or so. But he will be building his presence and his understanding of the kingdom that he will one day inherit by doing things like this, by meeting people, by listening to them, by talking to them, by hearing their condolences today. He's very much the modern royal. I think Charles would like to be the modern royal. He gave a very good speech yesterday, probably the best that most of us have heard him speak, and it came from the heart. Okay, it was written down, it was scripted, it was well delivered, it was rehearsed, as all of these things are, but it sounded authentic, it sounded genuine.
Yeah, it certainly did. I listened to it last night, and you had the sense of he knows what his responsibility is, but he also expressed so much of himself, a bit more, I would say, that we've seen from him before. And you're talking about the sharing of the responsibility, and of course there we can see Kate, the new Princess of Wales, her duty grows as well. What do you think Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, how much does this change for them when they have said in the past that they are almost giving up their royal titles? But at the end of the day, regardless of what happens, I think everyone around the world who follows them will always think of them as they are, as of royalty. And perhaps do you think this is something that will bring Harry back into the fold with his family and for him to take on more responsibility in that way?
I think the next 10 days has the potential to be a game changer for Harry. Clearly today he is back at the heart of the royal family, doing what is expected of a royal. And you can see him on the screen there, doing it in such a way that feels very human, very connected to the public around him. He doesn't have that living over in California. He is born to this. I'm sure he has a huge sense of duty. He and his wife and their two young children have chosen to step away and live differently from that. But being back in the cocoon of the royal family for 10 days and being close to his brother, his sister-in-law, and all of the other close royals is bound to have an impact. It will be interesting to see how his wife, the Duchess of Sussex, reacts to this as well. I don't think Prince Harry will be.
I think we may have just lost Mark Shanahan there, but he was actually talking about. Mark, I just want to check if you're able to hear me, if you're still there on the line.
Yes, I can still hear you. Sorry, it's a little bit not the greatest connection at my end.
Oh, no, but please continue. We're actually just looking at pictures now of Meghan, Prince Harry's wife, also greeting many of the people who've come out there to commiserate with the royal family.
Yeah, I mean, this was not her life, but she married into it. It was very, very difficult to her. The media in the United Kingdom have been, or aspects of them have been absolutely awful to her. Now she's seeing it, meeting real people in Windsor, hearing from them without that editorial filter of the media. And I hope she gets a much better impression of how she's actually pretty highly regarded by ordinary people in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think for many of our viewers who are watching this from outside the UK, some of the press coverage that she's received has really been awful. It's been discriminatory. It's even been racist to some extent, and that's outside the UK and very much within it. But as you said earlier, at a time of great sadness and of great sorrow, the country has really come together to pay their respects, to mourn, to commiserate with this family. And these two men, I think many of us who can remember the death of their mother, the funeral of the two of them walking behind her casket. I'm somebody who was born in the same year as Prince William, and I cannot even imagine how difficult that must have been for him as a teenager to have to be so solemn and to mourn in front of a country and in front of the whole world for his own mother, and a woman who was so loved by so many. And one could argue that both of them are actually interacting with the public. It's something that they learnt from their mother, to speak to people, to be gracious and accepting. And you can really tell from the faces of the people they're greeting how loved these four members of the royal family really are.
I think so. I think what really, really comes across is the pride that the nation has in the royal family, which is very much centred on the Queen. I mean, we don't know what the future of the monarchy will be over the next decades. But at the moment, there is that national sense of sadness, that national sense of mourning, and it needs a kind of human outpouring. And the fact that you've got the younger royals here today, providing a focus for people's emotions, for people who want to say thank you for the Queen's life, and just also thank you for William, for Catherine, for Meghan, for Harry being there today and taking the time to meet ordinary people when they could be with their courtiers and with their very well-connected friends and with their inner circle of family. But they're showing that a barrier has somewhat been lifted, that it's not like the generations of royals in the past who would walk nicely down the middle of the path, who would wave to either side, who would have courtiers go and collect those flowers, who might stop at the odd person and give them a quick handshake, but probably not give them a hug like that. This is something very different, and perhaps marks the changing of the era as much as the death of the Queen.
The changing of the era, do you think this is also something that keeps people's interest in the royals, in the sense that not everyone in the UK or even around the world thinks a monarchy is necessary? There are many people who really don't see the point of having a king or a queen or princes or princesses, and see it as possibly a burden on the taxpayer. But with this new generation, there's still so much interest. And even looking at the crowd there are people from all age groups. It's not just possibly older people who have known the Queen throughout their lifetime, but also very young Britons.
Yeah, I think perhaps that reflects a little bit of the celebritization of the royal family and the fact that Harry and Meghan, as they tend to be known, rather than the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and equally William and Kate, rather than the Prince and Princess of Wales, are seen as celebrities. We have to be careful with that. They are the constitutional heads of state, or the King. King Charles III is our constitutional head of state. He is not a political leader, but all politics flows from him. He defines the government. He appoints the Prime Minister. Through the Privy Council, it is the King who appoints ministers. All of these things actually still do matter. We are a country with a huge and long tradition. That tradition can't just be lost. And if you look at it financially, yes, the royal family do cost a lot of money. Possibly too many members of the royal family get rather too much money through it. But the income that they drive into the country far, far, far exceeds their cost. And they do make the United Kingdom a little bit different on the world stage. We could just have a president like many, many other countries, but we don't. We have a representative government that in the end reports through to the monarch. I don't think that will change. And the more people understand about that, the more they want to keep it and they value that tradition.
And they're certainly the most famous royal family in the world. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And of course, King Charles III, he's not just head of the UK, he's head of 14 other countries, many of them part of the Commonwealth. They include Canada, Australia and New Zealand. I know in Australia, not everyone believes that now the King should be head of state. Do you anticipate any changes among countries where the King is, it's a ceremonial title, but is still head of state for independent democratic countries?
Been voices both in Canada and in Australia to have a republic and to move away from the monarchy. We've seen it among a number of Caribbean islands. 4 of the Caribbean states have become republics. It could well be that more do in the future. So yes, the days of empire are long gone. The Commonwealth has changed hugely, the Commonwealth of Nations. It's been a very long time since it's been the British Commonwealth. I think the hangover from the days of the Queen being Queen of the Dominions, as it was, will draw to a close. And over the next decade, we will probably see more republics declared among those nations that at the moment call the monarch their head of state.
And yeah, the drawing of the close, we also see those cars actually leaving Windsor, where it got a long line of people who've come out to pay their respects and tributes to the Queen. She passed away at the age of 96 on Thursday. Her grandsons, Prince William, Prince Harry, and their wives, Kate and Meghan, have been greeting the many mourners who've come out and received flowers, a real show of unity from these brothers who've had a tense relationship over the last year or so. Mark, something I'd like to touch on, speaking about countries in the Commonwealth, because while the UK, of course, mourns, and many around the world, there has also been brought into question the criticism of the Crown, criticism of the Queen herself, who famously never expressed views about politics, but many have spoken about the fact that she also ruled over an empire that was responsible for colonialism, that was responsible for some of the atrocities that we still see today and are bearing the brunt of in many countries, in many African countries. And while there's been an outpouring of grief, there have also been many who've said they may not mourn for the Queen because they didn't believe that she did enough to help certain issues, one of them being apartheid in South Africa?
It's probably not the time to get too deeply into that issue now. I work in higher education. I work at a university. We are working very strongly on decolonisation in our curriculums. So looking at a world history from a world view, not from the old-fashioned British imperial view. I think you will find that across the UK and beyond now. Her son, Charles, and in fact her grandson's William, when he was in the Caribbean earlier on this year, I believe it was, made apologies for things that have happened there in the past. I think now we mourn a particular person who has left us after a hugely long time, an era in which many, many awful things have happened. History will continue to be written. Issues will be uncovered. They will be dealt with then. But let's get through the next 10 days or so and see her safely on her final journey. And then probably it is the time to review the Elizabethan era and to look at those questions of whether she could have done more or different, or where the responsibilities lay.
Mark Shanahan, it's been fantastic speaking to you. He's from the University of Surrey. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you.